If you stumbled across this video, chances are you've either been diagnosed with tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, or you simply have unexplained elbow pain. That's why we're here. I'm Coach Zach with Coach Chris. We're gonna explain to you what's going on with your tennis or golfer's elbow, and we're gonna give you practical steps to get out of pain. Golfer's elbow is otherwise known as medial epicondylitis. If you have pain on the inside of your elbow, that is the definition of golfer's elbow. Tennis elbow is considered lateral epicondylitis, so the outside of your elbow. If you have pain or inflammation or anything going on there, that's what tennis elbow is. Chris, as an athletic trainer, have you ever dealt with someone with either golfer's elbow or tennis elbow?
I've definitely seen it a lot, a good amount of times. And it's funny because, especially now, I feel like golf and pickleball are really picking up. I don't know, every time I'm checking my social media, I see my friends out golfing, having a couple drinks, really trying to get their game together and adding a lot of extra stress to their forearm and their elbow. And even pickleball is really exploding. I don't know about in your neighborhood. There's been so many pickleball courts. They're actually even taking over tennis. It's not even really, tennis isn't even the big thing anymore. It's pickleball, which is kind of funny because it's actually an older thing and you're getting athletes getting used to kind of getting back out on the court and just bringing some awesome excitement into older people getting out and getting fit. What's funny about, tennis elbow and golfer's elbow is it is called epicondylitis, meaning you're having that inflammation here right in between the joint where your elbow is, where you kind of get that bend. So those two spots are getting stabilization for your left and right movements, and that's kind of where you're getting all that stress, is right on that epicondylitis, right where that ligament is. So it's definitely something I see really common. It's one of those muscles that aren't really worked, and your weekend warrior is really suffering from these types of injuries all the time.
Yeah, and so before we get into the practical parts of how to correct it, let's talk about why this happens in the first place. Because just because you play golf or play tennis or pickleball doesn't necessarily mean that you will develop this pain in the elbow. What causes one person who plays the sport to get it and another person not to get it is simply restriction along the kinetic chain. So for instance, take a golf swing, right? There needs to be a lot going on for you to get a really good golf swing. First of all, your hips have to have the rotation to be able to get more torque in your swing. Your spine also has to rotate, as well as your shoulder needs to open up so you get that full swing to be able to send that ball. Problem is, especially in older athletes or older people playing, maybe their hips aren't as mobile, so they don't get as much rotation. Their spine is not as mobile either, so they don't get as much rotation. Their shoulder, so they're here, when they go to swing, because the hips, the spine, the shoulder are all restricted, the elbow is gonna take more of that trauma. So over the course of playing a whole game or months, years of playing, not having the mobility required is gonna cause more of these little joints to act up. Same thing with tennis or pickleball, right? So tennis or pickleball, tennis elbow comes more from the backhand. But if you don't have enough of that hip or spine mobility, guess what's gonna happen? It's all gonna be wrist. It's all gonna be the elbow. Over time, it's gonna cause that pain. So the root cause solution of tennis elbow or golfer's elbow is to get more mobility in your hips, your spine, your shoulder, so you're not relying too much on these little muscles that cause this pain.
And what's unique about these injuries specifically is they're not just for tennis and golf or even pickleball. Really, when we're talking about pain in this joint and in your elbow, it's caused by little micro traumas that really add up over time, no matter what you're doing. You could be shooting like a basketball, that's elbow stress. We were talking about even hockey, really field hockey, lacrosse, anything that you're getting that whipping motion with that elbow is gonna add that extra stress and really set you up for possible injury in that elbow area. And a lot of times with injury, we think it comes from muscle weakness, but as Zach was talking about, it's also what you're doing to get into that movement. Are you moving your hips? Are you moving your back?
So just because it's called tennis elbow or golfer's elbow doesn't mean that those sports are the only ones that cause this. Like Chris said, you can get it from basketball, from baseball, from anything that involves that quick throwing motion or hitting motion. So it's not just limited to tennis elbow or golfer's elbow.
Once you figure out you're having pain, I think the first step before we start talking about rehab and things is you really need to target what is causing your pain. If you're not doing golf and not doing tennis, you really need to figure out what in your day-to-day life is giving you that elbow pain. Maybe it's a specific thing you're doing in the kitchen or cleaning or working out, anything like that. I think recognition is the first sign to trying to fix what you're trying. Recognition is the first sign to fixing your injury.
And this is a big thing too, especially with the more simple joints like the elbow and the knee. Right, the elbow is mostly a hinge joint. There is some action going on when you pronate or supinate. Same thing with the knee. It's literally just a hinge joint. So anytime there's knee pain or elbow pain, always look up or down. So in terms of knee, look at the ankle or the hip. In terms of the elbow, look at the wrist or the shoulder. In terms of golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, ultimately, most likely it comes from the shoulder, the spine, the hips. So it's not just about targeting this one thing. You want to improve everything because the body doesn't work in isolation. Now let's get into some specific rehab and treatment protocols to help with your specific elbow pain. So as an athletic trainer, how would you go about rehabbing someone that is dealing with either golfer's or tennis elbow?
Yeah, so once you dial in that's what you're dealing with, this is what your injury, like you said, we want to go below and we want to go above the site of injury. So when we're looking at below, right, if we're talking about tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, you really want to be strengthening your flexors and your extensor muscles of your hand and arm. So on the top side of your arm, they all come up and attach at your lateral epicondyle. So when you're strengthening, a lot of wrist extension type exercises are going to help you. Now each one of those, we have a bunch of different tendons in there that work all your fingers. So really what you want to do is you want to recruit as many muscles as possible when you're strengthening. And then on the flip side, when you're talking about golfer's elbow, when we're on the medial side here, you're looking at all your forearm flexors. So all those little muscles, you might be able to see them. When you move your fingers, they all come up and they attach on this medial side, and all of those muscles come into action when you're going through the motion of swinging or trying to play pickleball or golf. So that's for down below. You also want to look above the elbow joint. And for that, we're talking about biceps, your triceps, the bigger muscles. You definitely don't want to ignore those larger muscles because those is what's really driving you through the motion. There's also another action of rotation of the forearm, which is heavily involved when you're doing a racket swing or a golf swing. As you're coming through and following through with that hit, you're gonna get a rotation of the forearm, and a lot of times that will weakness in that area will also give you that elbow pain that you're struggling with at home.
It's like that flick of the wrist. Like think about a tennis swing or more like a pickleball. Like when you hit it, it's like a quick little flick. So that's that supination, pronation, this movement right here.
And I would say most injuries to me that I see come down to imbalance and weakness. So if you're able to do some of these exercises at home, I think they're going to benefit you and you're going to have a pain-free game the next time you're out.
In terms of strengthening, we also don't want to forget one very important part. So especially if you're playing a sport like golf or tennis or anything that you're gripping really hard, your fingers are always going to be in this flex state. So one of the things you can do, they create all kinds of products, or you can even use like a rubber band or a bucket of rice. They make specific bands where you can actually strengthen your finger extensors. Like you put a band on each finger and you just focus on spreading the fingers out. That can help up here as well and get into the elbow to help, as Chris said, help correct those imbalances. If you're always gripping, you need to do the opposite action to bring balance across the joints. Now, strengthening is not the only thing that you should be doing, right? Because while weakness can be a very primary factor to creating this pain and this epicondylitis, this golfer's and tennis elbow, this imbalance can also be caused by muscles being too tight, right? So maybe if you have, let's say, golfer's elbow, the flexors are too tight, but the extensors are too weak. So you maybe don't necessarily want to strengthen muscles that are too tight, but that's where body work or more sports massage would come in. So if someone comes into me at the clinic with golfer's elbow or tennis elbow, one of the first things I'll do is use my palpation skills to actually relax the muscles that are too tight. And then after the muscles that are too tight are relaxed and you get rid of that hypertonicity, those muscles are relaxed, then you can look towards the strengthening, the rehabbing of strengthening the muscles that are too weak. So it's not just throw more exercise, not just throw more things to do, but also you want to relax the muscles that are too tight. And stretching, so let me ask you, where does stretching come into this? Because stretching is a very nuanced topic that deserves a lot of detail. We won't get into in this, but how would you say stretching correlates to maybe correcting this elbow pain?
I think you made a great point. I think injuries is that balance between strength and tightness, right? Or mobility and weakness. Like where is your injury coming from? Is it one more than the other? Is it both? Do you know what I mean? You kind of want to weigh that and really listen to your body, and that's really what's going to tell you, especially if you're not getting maybe an advanced practitioner involved. So you got to listen to your body. I would say mobility is super, super important. I like to go about mobility, not necessarily at home, but I add mobility in as a prehab before you're about to start exercising. I personally think that's the best time to do it. And obviously, I don't know what your thoughts are about static stretching versus dynamic stretching. I'm sure we can go off on a tangent for that for a while. But when I'm talking about prehab, I'm talking about some gentle range of motion type stuff, things that are getting your body used to the movements that you're about to start doing during activity. And I think just getting that muscle excited, warming it up, opening up that joint space, getting it ready, I think that's super, super important.
Actually, this is a big shift in consciousness for you at home to want to maybe think about how you're going about your warm-up. Instead of using the word warm-up, I actually like to use the word priming. As you said, preparing your body for what's coming. So let's say you're about to go play tennis or about to go play pickleball. First of all, you want to warm up your body to be able to move in all directions. So in that case, you can do something where you run forward, run to the side, do a little karaoke, run backwards. You just want to get your body primed in all this. You also want to get your forearm and wrist. So maybe you do some little controlled articular rotations, CARs, where you're taking your wrist through a full range of motion. I'm not a big fan of static stretching. I think that over time that actually weakens the muscles and weakens the ligaments and makes you a little bit too hypermobile. Big problem I see with a lot of yogis. They're so focused on being able to stretch, get into splits. Problem is this destabilizes joints. So I'm not saying static stretching is a bad thing, but you want to go about it smart and using it deliberately in the right way. In terms of this elbow pain that we're talking about in this video, you want to maybe get into the stretching of muscles that are too tight. If you're working at a desk all day, you want to get into maybe some light static stretches, but you don't want to be holding them for too long.
So you're about to hit the course, you're on the golf course, you're trying to hit your best score of the summer. What should you do for prehab before you get out there? I'm gonna tell you right now, there's all sorts of things you could do, but I'm gonna give you a quick 30-second tip that you could do to really prime up those flexor muscles of the forearm. What you're gonna do is you're gonna flex up that forearm, really activating all these flexor muscles that are attaching on the inside here. You're gonna hold it for about 5 seconds, come down, straighten the arm out, pull the fingers back, hold it for 5 seconds. We're gonna do 5 reps of this. That's really gonna get this forearm nice and warmed up and stretched out, and you're gonna be ready to hit your best game.
So that's what you should do before you go and play golf. But what happens after you play your game and you get home and you're just really aching with that pain? It hurts so bad, you never wanna play golf again, but you do wanna play golf. What do? So there's a little bit of a self-treatment protocol that you can do, or you can have your loved ones or someone at home do for you. Let's say it's your right arm that's hurting, you just find that bone, so it's just that inside bone, and you go right under it. So you go down towards your pinky and put some good pressure there. Again, if you don't have the thumb strength, you can have someone else do it. You can even use a lacrosse ball on a table. But you find that pressure point where it really starts to hurt, you make a fist and you just bring some movement, kind of like what Chris was showing you, but now you're adding pressure to help relax the muscle and also get everything moving and gliding the way it should be. So again, you can just use your thumb, get in there, Bring some light movement, work your way down, all the way down until right about halfway down your lower arm. That's just some self-massage you can do. You can even use maybe some lotion or some oil and just do some glides. Use your fingers as best you can. I know if you don't have the skill for it, it might not be working for you. Use a lacrosse ball. So these are some quick fixes that you should be doing before you go and play golf or after you play golf and it's hurting. But to really get to the root cause, as we've already talked about, you want to look at your mobility and your restrictions everywhere else in your body. You want to make sure your spine, your shoulder, your hips are moving well and moving strong, because you want to get all of the power from your hips as opposed from your arms.
So a good prehab when we're talking about for tennis elbow, which is going to be the outside of your elbow, we're going to look at all things that are going to strengthen these extensor muscles that we were talking about. All those muscles that come down and line your fingers and give you that extension of the wrist when you're following through on a backhand. All right. So what I would do is I would take your tennis racket or whatever you would have, you know, if you're playing pickleball or tennis or golf, and you're going to stabilize that forearm and work on those extensions, really feeling that nice burn up and down the forearm, trying to get that full range of motion. I would do a set of 10, and then I would also add in a little bit of a dynamic stretch. So I don't know how you feel about this type of stretch, but I always like to do like a reverse prayer stretch for my extensors. You would put the tops of your hands together like this, getting them nice and close, and then you're just going to drive your elbows down, and really what it's going to do is it's going to stretch out those extensor tendons and get you ready to play. So when we were talking about elbow pain, you know, lateral or medial epicondylitis or golfers versus tennis elbow, this is an awesome exercise that you could do that's really going to target both. It goes off that concept we were talking about, where when you're hitting that tennis ball or hitting that golf ball, there's a lot of rotation at the wrist that's happening. So you need to strengthen those deep rotators to really eliminate pain and give you the strength you need to get that awesome shot off at golf. So you could take anything in your house. You could get a pan, you could use a tennis racket, you could try to use a golf club. It might be a little too heavy, but if your forearm's strong enough, it should tolerate it. What you're gonna do is you're gonna grab onto your tennis racket or your frying pan or anything like that with a handle. So the weight is up here. All you're gonna do, you're gonna plant that forearm down on your knee, and you're gonna get some nice rotation. You're gonna come all the way up. Now, it's not a fast movement. You're not trying to whip it around. Everything should be nice and slow and controlled and building that muscle up in the rotators. So that's supination of your hand, where your palm is straight up. And to finish the movement, you're gonna come back over nice and slow and finish the movement like that. And you're gonna get that pronation of the wrist. I would do 3 sets of 10. I would do 3 sets of 10 for this exercise.
And just to piggyback off of what Chris said when he showed you that prayer stretch to get into the extensors, when I do that, I don't really feel it. Now, maybe you feel it. I know Chris says that he feels it really well, but if you're someone that doesn't feel it, here's just a way to spice it up. You come down to the floor. Now, I want you to make fists. And when you make these fists, I don't want your fingers to open up. So make fists and keep them clenched. Bring the knuckles together like this. The tops of your hands come down to the ground. Now from here, it's very simple. You're gonna just let your elbows come down to the ground, begin to put pressure in the backs of your hands to straighten out your arms and drive your elbows together. Don't let your fingers come open. Don't let your hands do anything weird. Keep the knuckles clenched, keep the hands down, bend, and then straighten, try to bring the elbows together. You'll feel that right up in there. It's also good to strengthen these muscles as well. So stretching and strengthening at the same time. Now, let's say you just played tennis and now you're hurting. You get home, you want to ice it, you want to take your ibuprofen. What are some things you can do on the spot to get out of that pain? Self-treatment, here we go again. If you don't have the palpation skills or weak hands, this might not be for you. Get someone else to do it. Get a trained professional, or get your wife or your husband to maybe try. You're gonna stabilize your forearm just as you did in these exercises. This time, you're gonna take your other hand and you're gonna go for this massive muscle here, brachioradialis, brachial, all these muscles here. Keep that arm that you're about to grab relaxed and bent, and you're just gonna grab it with the hand. You're gonna find the tender spots. Now, if you're dealing with this tennis elbow, that should be on fire. You hold that 10, 15 seconds, deep breaths, and then you move along. You can also do what's called pin and stretch, where you grab something that's really tender, and then you just bring some slight, gentle movement in. These are just some tools that you can do to relax all that tension, those really tight muscles causing you that pain, right after you play your game. So you might be home thinking, okay, this is all great, but can I just play through it? Like, I got this pain, but I love golf, I love tennis, I love pickleball, let me just play through it. What would be your advice to someone who just wants to play through it?
This is one of the most common and toughest question and answers that I get. And I think it comes down to there's different levels to your play. Are you an amateur? Are you just kind of going out and shooting with the family? Are you trying to win tournaments? Are you trying to win championships in high school? And there's so many different answers to this. And I'm a firm believer as that there is some pain in sport. I think there's going to be some pain in sport. I think toughing some things out works, whereas toughing other things out don't. And you really need to listen to your body. And I think the one factor that you need to ask yourself is this injury affecting me outside of the activity that I'm trying to do? Is this golf injury stopping me from playing with my kids at home, or doing the duties that I do at work, or doing the dishes? I think at that point you need to tell yourself, okay, maybe it's time to limit, maybe it's time to take a step back and limit the amount of golf or the amount of pickleball or the amount of tennis that I'm doing, and really focus on getting better instead of just playing through it. When trying to determine if you're going to play through something or not, that's my determining factor.
So like Chris said, it's very individualized, but it's also the decision of, do you take a step back or maybe do you take a step forward? In that if you're playing golf and you have this pain, maybe you just need to hire a coach to look at your swing to tell you, hey, your hips aren't moving correctly, your spine's not moving correctly, and so your elbow's taking the brunt. So maybe you just need to go a little bit deeper into the sport, correct your form, because just because you play golf or tennis doesn't mean that this pain is inevitable. Something is going wrong with your form, your swing, or maybe it's a pre-existing injury that you have to address. So maybe you take a little step back, or maybe you go deeper into it to get to the root of the pain. It's very individualized. It's up to you. How far are you willing to take your sport, and how much pain are you willing to tolerate as you play? So hopefully, if you deal with tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, you got some value in this video. Now you know what's causing it. You have some tools to correct it, and a long-term plan to help you play better and get out of pain. You want to add anything?
Sounds great to me. Get after it.
I'm Coach Zach here with Coach Chris, and we'll see you next time. Yeah.